Hi, today I just want to talk about a little mistake that I've been making when it comes to, mistakes you make when trying to learn any kind of new thing. In this case, trying to learn how to do 3D modeling and things, which is not knowing which tutorials are useful and which ones are kind of leading you down the garden path that won't actually go anywhere. For example, with this particular thing, it may seem vaguely okay. Like, if you notice, I've started defining the muscular structure and things like that, and the general structure of like where muscles lie on the body and things from the basic tutorial for Blender modeling and animating a character. But the problem with that tutorial is it makes it kind of hard to add too much detail because, as you can see here, the geometry is an absolute mess. Because I've not really been focusing too much on doing it right, I've more kind of been brute forcing it. So while it looks vaguely human, it doesn't do anything right. For example, like if I tried to do any kind of like animation related stuff, it wouldn't really it's starting to kind of crease a bit, but not in the right kind of way. And it's vaguely fine, it wouldn't scale well. In general, it's kind of like the more detail you add, the more of a mess it becomes. So what I've been doing instead is, because that was just starting from just a basic thing, just moving the vertices, like I started with just a sphere and just been extruding from there. But then I tried, I was advised to try sculpting, and so I tried the sculpting with the fingertip here, which of course this was one I made sort of pixel by pixel, where I just kind of like built it like vertex by vertex to kind of get the basic shape around. I was quite happy with that. And then this was my first attempt, and I completely screwed it up. But then I really learned about how to properly crease things, and I ended up with this. But it's okay, but it's just I found it really hard to work with. It's especially because something I didn't recognise as well, because it's something the tutorials don't really tell you, is when to use certain things. For example, one thing I didn't know about sculpting is that when the 3D artist is doing sculpting, they don't actually care about the actual mesh itself. They only care, they don't care about the topology, they only care about getting the basic shape. Which means that, like, for example, it's saying the dynamic topology so I can make more faces and things, bring that a little bit kind of, used the wrong tool. Let's use this snake hook tool, and let's just bring that out a bit at the back, just to kind of, as you can see, the topology is getting quite messy, and that's because it kind of just creates a bunch of random nonsense. But that's because in this form, what I didn't realize is when artists do this, they're actually only focusing on the general shape, and then they kind of like they actually vertex by vertex remodel it, basically tracing over the final thing to have a much neater mesh. And so what I've started doing instead is I've been kind of treating it like almost like a 3D pen, in that I've been starting with this reference image of Sigourney Weaver, because I wanted to try and do something reasonable with her face. I've gone to like the full profile, dot by dot, essentially, with vertices. And then I started mapping out where the eye sockets would go, and the nose and nostrils and things like that. And that's looking a lot better now. And it's also got the right kinds of loops as well. I'm just going to include something so you can see the reference image I was using. So add image reference will be in face structure, and it's, I believe it's this one, maybe. Yeah, this one. I've started using this to kind of like make sure that the loops are kind of forming in the correct way. For example, that loop around the nose here is found here, for example. So I'm kind of like starting to get the hang of getting the topology right, or at least more right than I was before. By just kind of like working out where I want to put stuff and sort of physically drawing it, almost like with a pen. For example, I can just like a little thing I'm going to do just to kind of like show off the idea of what I meant is I'm going to do a little quick thing. It's not something I'll be saving with it, I'm going to be kind of deleting it shortly afterwards, but it's like just to get an idea of how I've been starting to work. So let's say it's going to be the general shape of a shoe, just to kind of get the idea of it across. I'd then kind of I've been doing kind of the outline of the shoes to be this sort of thing to kind of like start defining the shape of the sole. And of course we'd have like a proportional editing on so that I can get the kind of like these kind of shapes going as well. Like, this is just kind of to get the idea across there, like that I'd sort of build the sort of general shape of the shoe in this sort of a, and then kind of like as it's going, it's kind of like, it would kind of become sort of like a 3D drawing of the thing. This is of course not a proper version, this is kind of like a quick thing I'm kind of trying and failing at from this perspective, just to kind of like show the idea. But this is how I'm going to be planning on like doing a lot of sort of this kind of, these kind of complicated shapes, is sort of not quite brute forcing them, but kind of figuring it out in that sort of way, where I'd sort of be. But this is the idea I've had anyway for how to better kind of work with complex objects without making too much of a mess, because it's definitely working for the topology of the face here, and so if I'm actually giving it a proper go, not just kind of like roughing it in the middle of a video here, but this is the sort of a way I'm planning on doing to kind of like keep the topology consistent, because that way I can just keep adding individual, instead of having to make entire loops, I can just kind of like even things out a bit by adding an extra vertex here, for example, that sort of thing, so it would match with the rest of the thing. And that's just kind of, this is sort of the lessons I've been learning with like how different techniques are used and when they're used and when they doesn't really make sense to use them. I'll sort of give you a bit of an update on my sort of autistic journey, I guess, and I'll let you know when I've made more progress. Goodbye.